You see, kids, Jack Miller winning in MotoGP is a bit like the London buses. You wait a long time and then two come along at once. Welcome back to Motorsport 101. Hello everybody, welcome to episode 305, the MVP edition of Motorsport 101. Glad you could join us. We had absolute chaos in MotoGP for the first time in 4 years. We went flag to flag, baby, and it was exactly how a MotoGP flag to flag race goes. Utter mayhem, big gaps, and some surprises. But the one thing that wasn't a massive surprise, Jack Miller wins. I know, that's really strange to say in 2021, but here we are. But with me, as always on this show, we got Ryan King. Hello, sir.
Yes, 305, doing it for Pitbull this week, or doing it for Formula 1, because that's the exact distance of an F1 race. Probably, this one's for Pitbull, Dale.
Mr. Worldwide himself. And, King, we have reason to celebrate the Knicks of the 4th seed. Congratulations, sir.
Yep, home court advantage against
you
the
get
Atlanta
a home
Hawks.
playoff series. The Knicks not only made the playoffs, they get a home playoff series. I'm just like, after years of rinsing King on this podcast over his beloved Knicks, they're actually good, like really good.
There's a lot of people I can thank for this, but I think I gotta thank the new recent fandom of one Scott McLaughlin. I think that's what put us over the top this year. I
did see that. I saw him on Twitter retweet. Like, oh, he's adopted the Knicks. I was like, well, you could do a lot worse, I suppose. You could pick the Boston Celtics, isn't that right, Cam?
Well, you know, like the Tottenham Spurs video from many a year ago, we're fucking shit.
I like how he's called it. I like how he's called them the Ham Spurs for the second straight episode.
I don't care.
It's a commitment to the bit. Like,
which by the way,
being a Celtics fan has torched all of my goodwill. And I didn't have much to give.
I gotta say, though, calling them the Ham Spurs, though, sounds like an incredible diss if you know somebody who's a Tottenham supporter and you just want to give them the ultimate disrespect.
Oh, dear. And you know what? With Tottenham, it fits. And you know what's funny? We're recording this the same day Harry Kane hands in a transfer request. It all just fits. It all just comes together. That's why I love hosting this show. It's art, everybody. We love to see it. Speaking of which, RJ O'Connell, hello, sir. How you doing?
Howdy. Great to be back. No developments going on whatsoever. Just ready for another normal day of podcasting with no other stuff going on whatsoever. None that I can think of.
Alright, RJ, it's the intro. You can stunt a little bit on us hoes. What's been going on in the O'Connell household lately?
Well, besides cleaning up the apartment, making dinner, straightening up the restrooms for company to come over, I also write about IndyCar now for racefans.net.
Yeah! Hey!
I have a job writing about stuff. This is equal parts exciting and terrifying at the same time.
No, I think I speak on behalf of all of our co-hosts and all of our supporters, and we say congratulations, man. We're very proud of you, and you are going to crush this. If you attack it with half the charisma and charm that you do on this show, you are going to ace it, my friend. I have no doubt in my mind. You're in very good hands over there, and I told Hazel specifically to take good care of you, and you'll be fine. I promise.
Thank you, Hazel, and thank you, Keith, for helping me with this. Feels awesome. What were you talking about on the show today?
Well, amazingly, we're talking about some IndyCar. Who'd have thunk it? But we'll also be talking about
Shock.
MotoGP. We're talking about MotoGP's French Grand Prix as well. Of course, big drama at the front. Jack Miller, a surprise Frenchman on the podium, and no, not Fabio Quartararo, believe it or not. Johan Zarco was there too. A nutty race for Marc Marquez we'll be talking about as well, because for the first time in over 600 days, he led a MotoGP race. Unfortunately, that's when the good news kind of ran out. More on that later. We'll be talking about King's favourite topic, stewarding, because this reared its ugly head in a couple of the classes as well. There's some discussion there I thought that was interesting regarding that, and we'll be talking IndyCar's Grand Prix of Indianapolis, where, I can't believe I'm saying this, the third new winner this season already, and we're only 5 rounds in, as Rinus Veekay took his first series win. And we got a spin move on the podcast! Yes! I knew somebody would come through. Thank you, RJ. King, you let me down there.
I forgot to move my stuff so I could do it.
I'm disappointed in all of you except RJ.
My
RJ
chair
is
doesn't
crushing it
swivel.
today.
I didn't have an option.
Oh, there we go. There we go.
Yes!
We did it.
Yes!
We did it.
To be fair, I'd have done it myself, but my brother's getting his room renovated, so I'm literally surrounded by a ton of his stuff. So I literally have not got the space for it.
I have a literal sim rig next to me.
Yeah, it's understandable. So we'll be talking about that.
You're not
Rinus
special,
Veekay.
Cam. Okay, you're very special to us, but I'm also got the same rig next to me.
No. Tell me how you really feel.
Before we get into a sim rig measuring contest, we'll also be talking about that, and obviously probably the other. The other major big story coming out of IndyCar, Romain Grosjean, and not only his first pole position in the series, but also a awesome drive to a first podium finish for him, and a very dramatic weekend for him in all the good positive ways, which we like around here. So all of that in the next hour or so, but let's get the housekeeping out of the way. Places you can find us real quick. We're on youtube.com/motorsport 101. If you're watching us on YouTube, hi! Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell, notifications, all that good stuff. If you haven't already, we're on facebook.com/motorsport 101. We're on Twitter at motorsport_101. And if you'd like to find our personal handles, if you're watching on YouTube, they're on the screen right now. They're also in the description. But if not, we're at Harrison101HD, at RJ O'Connell, at Ryan Eric King, and at CBuckley917. We're on Instagram, Motorsport101pod. RJ, show off the... Yes, beautiful. Yes, the Instagram account is there, Motorsport101pod. Follow us on there for updates, some sneak bits, some funny intros, and all that fun stuff. That's on there as well. And if you really, really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon. Patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of the audio editions of our show. You can upgrade to the video version for $10. And you can listen to these shows live as they're being recorded. And get into this welcome to our Discord server as well. So, all of that fun stuff and more in there. Check it out, patreon.com/motorsport101. I do occasionally stick the odd episode up there for just $1 as well. So, stick around, even if it's not at $5. You never know. I feel generous every once in a while. Anyway, after this, we'll get into MotoGP's French Grand Prix. As mentioned, this was MotoGP's first flag-to-flag race in 4 years. It was a race that started dry, rained about 4 laps in, with a torrential downpour, and by the time we got to the end, it was pretty much bone dry again. It was Jack Miller that pretty much led almost every lap from start to finish, believe it or not. He had a little bit of early pressure from Maverick and Fabio, but once the rain came down, there was no stopping him, despite a interesting double long lap penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Both factory caddies were guilty of that crime on that one, and that was a spicy one to say the least. We had Johan Zarco coming through the field to finish in second. I think that's the 5th time he's finished second in his career. He's getting really frustrated that the first win isn't coming. And Fabio Quartararo finishing third, and if you saw the celebration over the line, he was punching his fuel tank like he just won the championship. More on that later. To give you a little fun quote about it, he said, honestly, it was the strangest race of my life because I was in P3, it was starting to rain, and in the beginning, Maverick and Jack were taking it a bit carefully, so I think the guys could catch me through this. I took it carefully, I got the wrong bike, more on that in a minute. I was going to jump on Maverick's bike, so I just ran to my bike, but it was a great experience, and most of all, we didn't expect to make the podium in this condition. He was adamant that if it was a wet race, he wasn't finishing top 3. And he did. A great result for Fabio in the context of the championship. But we've got to talk about Jack Miller first. We talked about it just a couple weeks ago, how it was his first win in nearly 5 years, and now he's gone back-to-back, and he's right back in the title picture. So, gentlemen, are we talking about Jackass the title threat?
Oh, Lord. Anytime you bring up title threat, you immediately, think about what are the upcoming rounds in the calendar, and, oh, Lord, it's looking pretty good for Jack Miller.
What's next, King?
Isn't it the Red Bull race?
No, it's Mugello.
Yes. Oh yeah, Mugello. How could I forget? Because it's the same day as Indianapolis.
Oh, yeah. Day of Collector is going to be a bit different this year, but but
both races might actually be a classic this time.
Oh yeah, needs more electricity, but Cam, do you what do we make of Miller here? It's looking cushy for Miller at the moment.
It's looking good. He's kind of emerged as, if not the more consistent of the two factory Ducatis, certainly the faster on race day. Pecco still has monster one-lap pace when he can use it. But considering the next two tracks, it's not out of the world to think of Jack going 4 on the bounce here. Because Mugello, he's been good round there. Ducati's good round there. And then Austria, which is, more or less the Ducati drone these days.
I should point out that the next round after Mugello is Catalunya. Then we get Sachsenring, Assen, and then
Why
the
did I
double
think that was next?
You're thinking F1 again, Cam.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I don't know why, I mean...
Well, MotoGP is the Formula 1 of bikes. Or is Formula 1 the MotoGP of cars? Who knows?
Yes. I think if he can continue just racking up the results that he has been, that he's proved that he can on this bike, there's no reason why he can't challenge for the title.
Yeah, which is amazing given... I was going to say,
him
it's
and
amazing.
Fabio at the front of the field, really, so far this year. Staying at the front of the field.
I would say it's funny. He's still the 3rd highest ranking Ducati in the championship right now because Bagnaia and Zarco are still in front of him. But there's something to be said about momentum, and to say the least. I mean, RJ, you saw the highlights just now again for the second time. What did you make of it all?
That was certainly an interesting race. I wouldn't have predicted Jack Miller to come out victorious after a double long lap penalty, but once that track started to dry out, and once Fabio Quartararo's began to take on the consistency of a freshly grated Parmesan cheese,
that soft front just cooked in the dry.
Checking out 2 wins on the bounce. I don't know if maybe he could. I think 3 in a row is possible. I think he could certainly rattle off 3 of the next 5, 3 of the next 6 even.
Maybe. Yamaha tends to go well at Catalunya. That could be interesting to keep an eye on as well. Fabio, I think, did win there last year as well. So it's starting to space out at the front. I mean, we didn't have time to mention guys like Suzuki having a horror weekend and whatnot, and they're way down the order.
Suzuki had the weekend from hell. 2 crashes for Rins. Big crash for Mir. No points.
Indeed. And on the other end of that title scale, we go back to the man who's now leading the championship again, and that's Fabio Quartararo, who leads the championship by a single point over Francisco Bagnaia, who stormed through to 4th in the end. I mentioned it. If you have not seen it, the celebration again. I've never seen a man celebrate 3rd so hard ever in MotoGP. Like, Fabio was so delighted he literally drank champagne out of Jack Miller's shoe.
The shoe he returned.
What year is it, folks?
2015.
I'm not drinking champagne. I'm not drinking champagne out of a shoe unless it's the undefeated Kobe 5s.
But in the context of the championship, and in the context of Yamaha probably being pretty slow most of the weekend, besides a freakish qualifying, just how important a podium was that for Fabio?
Huge.
He just had surgery, comes off the surgery for arm pump, finishes third. This was very important for Fabio to just...
Needed that after Jerez literally slipped out of his failing arm.
Yeah. This was... If it had come back this race, we have major concerns about his health for the rest of the year. It didn't. He... once the track dried, Ducati dropped that high horsepower anvil from the sky on them going down the main straight. But to get third, really, I think is the maximum result he could have gotten.
Yeah, on what was not a good day for Yamaha as a whole, because Maverick Vinales just couldn't get it together. You're looking at Valentino Rossi finishing a distant 11th. Like, that's the second best outcome that Yamaha got, because Franco Morbidelli crashed in the race, finished outside the points.
Twisted the knee again.
Oh.
Yeah, it was not a good weekend for Yamaha on the whole. So Fabio, their lead man, coming in third was a big result. We've said it on this show many a time. It was a phrase first coined by our former host, Mr. Adam Johnson, who said, you don't win your titles on your good days, you win them on your bad ones. And Fabio was ninth at this very Grand Prix in a very similar situation last year, because Le Mans was wet last year too. It wasn't a flag to flag, but it was fully wet for the whole way, and he finished ninth that year. So to come back again, a week off arm pump surgery and finishing third is mighty impressive. And back in the lead of the championship. But Bagnaio's not going away. Zarco scored good points again this weekend.
Bagnaia was ridiculous in the final few laps. He was catching Fabio to the tune of 2 seconds a lap.
Yeah, if this race had been one more lap longer, we'd have a different outcome at the top of this points table.
Indeed. Very, very interesting indeed. But Fabio's just going to keep racking those results up, and we'll see what happens when they hit Mugello next weekend. That's going to be very interesting. Speaking of which, there was one man here that we have to talk about, and again, the man is box office entertainment in every good and bad way imaginable, and that's Marc Marquez. And his race was all over the place, Cam.
Yeah, the most spectacular race on the day, in every sense of the word, was from Marc Marquez. First time in a year and a half, about, 600 days?
About 600 days.
Marc led a MotoGP race. Had a quick bike swap where he rushed the pit lane, actually distracted Fabio and pushed him into that mistake, pulling into the wrong garage, got on the bike, got out into the lead, and started to ride away. And that's as good as it got, because he hit the white paint coming out of the Ford chicanes, and, we've seen this picture before. Marc Marquez being flung off of a bucking Bronco of a Honda into the gravel trap. He got back on the bike, though. And in the wet conditions, he was a scarcely believable 1.6 seconds a lap clear of the entire field. Passing people with reckless abandon, showing us the old Marquez tenacity. And then he crashed again. And this time he was down for good, lost the front going through the Dunlop S's, and that was that. Said after the race, I was riding fast, maybe too fast. I didn't know the front riders were riding slower than me after the first crash. I was just riding, thinking about the recovering right arm. And other things. On that lap, I was just informing the team that I was going into the box to change to slicks because I believed the track was ready. He crashed on his in-lap once the track was drying out. How would you guys assess Marquez's, let's say, eccentric and erratic performance?
From a rider standpoint, I would say he did everything that was asked of him. This looked like Marc Marquez, well and truly, is back. He's overriding his equipment. He's fearless. He's riding at a level that few can match on their best days. From a pure riding perspective, I think he did about as well as he could given the circumstances. But Cam, we talked about this before we started the show. The MO for Honda has been, we can build whatever bike we want. Mark's just going to ride around the problems. And it's 2021, and that still seems to be the case.
Well, Honda knows they have a dog on their hand, and they're working on a fix. They tested a bike that was truly different in the last big test they had, I think 2 Mondays ago. But they're not allowed to use it because the engine is in a different place. You got different engine mounts. You have to change the engine casing. You can't do that this year. Dre, what do you think?
I was going to say, and to be fair, we only took a small chunk of Marquez's post-race comments in the script. He also mentioned later on that he did take some solace from his pace. I think he genuinely did not know he was 1.5 seconds a lap faster than Jack Miller, who won the race. He was the fastest man on track by miles, and he's got to take a little... Again, this is the first race since coming back where it looked like it was the old Marquez again. And that works in both ways. That's the Marquez we know and appreciate. There are going to be days where he will bin it, trying to do spectacular things on a motorcycle. Like, if you're a Marquez fan, you got to take the rough with the smooth sometimes, because this is just who he is at this point. Yeah. And he's going to try and handle the problems that Honda inevitably will give him. Honda's not had the best bike in MotoGP for 7 years now. So, this is... probably not since 2014, in my opinion. So the fact that, Marquez is compensating for its problems is nothing new. This was an excellent performance if you take the crashes out of it, unfortunately, which is strange to say.
It's kind of difficult to do that.
But it's one of those races. The conditions are about as bad as you could realistically hope for in a MotoGP race, because it was slippery, it was treacherous, and Le Mans conditions are erratic. Probably the most erratic of any track on the calendar. So, I'm not going to dunk on him too hard for crashing twice, because he's not the only guy who did.
No.
But, I think he needs to stop worrying about that arm so much and just enjoy your riding again, as best you can, because I'm not used to Mark talking about having his headspace clouded, thinking about the arm, thinking about all that other stuff. So, it's a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of thinking about the picture of Marc Marquez being the fastest guy on track, and yes, Marquez crashing is kind of a part of the experience, but can you really say that Marc Marquez is back when he's struggling to finish races? Like, if you can't finish a race, you can't score points. If you can't score points, you can't win the championship.
Is Mark's title hopes over?
I don't think they're over, but I think he needs to, as King put it, he needs to start finishing races. And he needs to start finishing races well. This, I think, this race is more than anything proof that, okay, Mark still has all that speed. When he's on it, he's still the fastest motorcycle rider on planet Earth, and it's not even close.
Mm-hmm.
But now he's got to just start taking the points and just see. It might come to him. Everyone else might start falling off their bikes. They did last year when they were all fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
He can't He can't try and force his way through the pack and win, because the Honda won't let him. It'll throw him off into the gravel every time now.
Yeah. He needs to think like probably 2016, where the Honda was a mess, but Yamaha's internal fighting, that was the last year of the Rossi-Lorenzo partnership. Lorenzo had already had one foot out of the door by then, and Marquez took advantage of their errors and was consistent and didn't go 100% all the way until after he'd won the title. And that's what won him that 2016 championship. He
won that title early.
To tell you that. Yeah, he won it 3 rounds early. He won it in Motegi, Honda's backyard. So yeah, that was a significant title win. To answer the question about his championship hopes, to borrow a phrase from another sport, we are probably in what I would say is the snooker's required phase. I mean, Fabio's not going away, and the problem now is that Marc is 64 points behind Fabio Quartararo, and he's already burned up 5 rounds to even be even further back than when he came back from his arm in the first place. So he's actually lost more ground since coming back.
Oh, yeah. Like, for as much as he needs to be consistent and just worry about work, but he's also in the point where he needs to start pressing for victories and racking them up at a consistent clip. This is not an enviable spot for him.
Yeah, he's not taking points out of Fabio yet. He was lucky in Jerez, obviously, that Fabio's body failed him, but it's not like last year. Last year, Johan Mir took advantage of everyone in the top 8, beating each other up relentlessly. This is not that this year. This year, Fabio has emerged as a genuine, true contender, and the Ducatis are all looking strong. He's going to have to work very, very hard to get back up the order, most definitely, and that's a shame, because I think Marquez could have won this race today, or this past weekend. I think he could have easily won that race, even without the double switch that he was probably going to do. So, this was a golden chance, and it slipped through the fingers. And that, you could see his reaction in the pit box after the race. He knew how important this one was. 2 parallels of the same coin, him and Fabio. Fabio knew how important that third was, and Marquez knew how important those 2 crashes were. And how it played out over the course of the weekend. Most definitely. Whew. King, it's your favourite. It's digging into the rule book. I'll save this one just for you.
Yes. Well, yeah, the weekend in France also highlighted, another issue with stewarding in MotoGP that was, I wouldn't say self-inflicted, but it's something that is a fairly recent innovation to MotoGP that has now become a headache for some, the long lap penalty. Most contentiously, it affected Fabio Gianantonio in Moto2, where he was given a long lap penalty for shoving off Hector Garzo, and while taking the penalty loop, he ran wide, and as it says in the regulations, if you go outside the double white lines, you have to take the penalty again, and it was divisive, to say the least. Personally, I think the long lap penalty is still a useful tool for the stewards to use to penalize people, but obviously some people think it's outlived its usefulness. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's the right solution, given that if you get a drive-through in MotoGP, it's the end of your race.
Yeah.
Just point blank. Your race might as well be over. The long lap penalty punishes you different amounts depending on different tracks, but they try to get it reasonably close everywhere.
Like, it is...
I think...
It's far more consistent than giving a penalty saying that you have to give up one position on track, because you never know how far behind the bike behind you on track is. A long lap penalty is fairly static all the time.
Yeah, if you drop a position, it could be 1 second, it could be 5 seconds. And you're never going to get consistency out of that just from the nature of motorsport.
Right.
But I tend to think that if the penalty has served its purpose, as his did, even though he ran wide, common sense should probably prevail. That, you served it, you didn't cut back in on the track and shortcut that penalty. But rules are rules, I guess.
Yeah, I think this was a classic case of, as the cricket fan in me would go, the spirit of the rules here. And I don't normally like using this term because it's bullshit, and unfortunately, it's one that only cricket fans swear by. And it's the rules are the rules. Unfortunately, I think it's a rule that needs a little bit of discretion, because if you watch the replay of it, DG goes around the outside of the white line. He didn't gain an advantage by going wide around the outside of the penalty loop, which for context was the bottom of the garage there. But giving him a second long lap penalty for failing to comply with the first, I thought was extremely harsh, especially given how treacherous the conditions were as well. It was very greasy out there. It only just stopped raining after the Moto3 race, and I don't think the punishment really fit the crime on that one. And
I disagree, because you have to lay down the line somewhere, because you don't want people gaming how to take a penalty as fast as possible.
I guess, but
I feel like that's pretty clear cut. That if you go to the inside of the white line, you're clearly shortcutting the penalty section of the track.
Right.
If you go out of the outside of it because you carry too much speed in, that's self-punishing in and of itself, because you might go out into the gravel and crash.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel on that one. I think it's a tricky one. And like, as King alluded to, the long lap is fairly consistent. I mean, again, it's not perfect, because obviously every track is different. Obviously it's at MotoGP's discretion as to where they put the penalty loop. Some solutions are better than others, but it's funny because I didn't have a problem with MotoGP using time penalties like they used to a couple of years ago. But the problem was that the way they were working out the deltas were inconsistent, so they just dropped it. And it's the next point on our list. I'll address that a little bit further, but I'm not sure. And the reason why I say I'm not sure is because the stewards are basically judge, jury, and executioner for an incident on track, and they can hit them with a punishment pretty much straight away. And with time penalties, there's a bit more flexibility that you can add or take away after the fact, after a race is done. If you do a long lap penalty in the middle of a race, there's no going back. And some incidents require some mitigation, like with what happened with the MotoGP race with Morbidelli and Pol Espargaro. There was fiery arguments between journalists about who to blame for that one, and thankfully I'm actually glad the stewards kept their hands in their pockets on that one, because they could have easily thrown a penalty Pol's way on that one, and that would have really split the room. But I think overall, time penalties are a better and more consistent way of doing it. I actually like F1's model when it's executed properly compared to MotoGP. I'm not massively against the long lap. I just think it could be better in that sense.
Yeah, I think obviously people want to gravitate towards a long lap penalty because your position on track is where you are. It's not your position plus or minus a couple seconds. And you still get to see people race each other for position. Then you don't really get that with time penalties.
Gives us that moment like last year with the long lap penalty at the bleeding edge of a tire.
Bruno, Johan Zarco, still art. To play on to that point, like, because we saw a lot of long lap penalties going. Now we had a double long lap penalty for speeding in the pit lane from both Ducatis. Fabio Quartararo got hit with one for an illegal bike swap because he parked it in Maverick's garage. That was a hilarious scene to watch on replay on that one. And of course we mentioned DG Antonio's incident in Moto2 as well. I mean, going into a deeper conversation, given we've seen how the sport has changed it up over the years, is the stewarding a problem? Because this is something that's come up a lot. We've had complaints about lack of communication as well. Team bosses have already been mad about this at certain points as well. I mean, is this conducive to an overall problem?
Well, it's kind of hard to say, because you'd have to point out what that problem is.
Yeah, it just seems to me as like I personally have this opinion that I think it's a bit strange that the long lap penalty has now become like the beacon of choice, and MotoGP has changed the way it punishes riders a lot in the last half decade. We went from the penalty point system, which was dumped after a year after what happened in 2015. We had...
God.
Yeah, you know how that ended. We had time penalties
Someone
for a
wrote
while.
a book on it.
Yeah, for track limits and whatnot. And then that was dumped, and now we've got the long lap penalty. And I'm not entirely sure the sport knows how to best discipline its riders. That's the problem I've got with this.
And, like, inherently, a lot of people who are voicing opinions about them having an issue with stewarding are people who are directly affected by stewarding.
The teams. Yeah, there's
Cause
been...
effect.
Yeah, there's been many an explosive meeting on that. I mean, Cam, how do you feel about it in general? Because it's been a bit erratic over the years.
It feels like every time we settle into something that everyone feels good about, that punishes people where they deserve to be punished fairly, something comes in and tips it on its head, and we scrap the whole system and start anew. I am not the biggest fan of that approach, because every system you put in place is going to have its pros and cons. Eventually, it's going to punish someone, in their eyes, unfairly. I tend to like, as I said, the long lap penalty because it has some modicum of consistency. You know how much you're going to lose. I think it's better than time penalties for the reason that King said, is you see the penalty happen on track. It's not your race time plus a certain amount of time. And we've had that, and it's been ditched. And we had the penalty point system, which was ditched after it, rightly or wrongly, did affect the title race in 2015 when someone got angry on Maine. So I don't think there's any perfect solution. I'd like to see MotoGP stick with what they've got now, because I think it's probably the most fair solution. But all that, of course, that all depends on how they execute those penalties.
Indeed. OJ, you got any 2 cents on this one?
Yeah, I just have to co-op with what Cam says. Ultimately, there are going to be very few universally accepted solutions that are going to mete out the same level of punishment or consequences all the way across the board, regardless of circumstance.
Yeah, there's always going to be that. I mean, we say this now. It's Monaco next week in Formula 1. There's going to be one wheel bang in there, and we're all going to get into a fight on Twitter as to how it should be dealt with.
Someone is going to choose violence into Sandoval, and everyone's going to come out of it mad.
No heroics into Sandoval, please. Wait, that's not my line.
The heroics into Sandoval.
No. So, I big old F1 cars going into Monaco. Yeah, good luck. We'll be talking about this again next week. I just put that down as a given from now. I'm starting on next week's script now, okay? Don't worry. It'll absolutely be relevant by the time we get around to it next week. I promise, okay?
So, notes about penalties, the 50th round of discussion of whether or not this should still be an F1 venue.
Yeah.
Something about glucose guardians on a yacht.
something about a Haas ending up in the Steak and Shake.
Oh, we're not doing that. Okay, RJ, Talk to me about IndyCar.
The IndyCar Series celebrated its third different first-time winner in just 5 rounds and the 5th different winner overall this season as 20-year-old Rinus Veekay romped through the field at the Grand Prix of Indianapolis to take an excellent victory, the first by a Dutchman in the series since Champ Car Guy and Minardi Team USA alum Robert Doornbos back at Mont-Tremblant in 2007. Of course, a massive part of the story of the weekend, though, belonged to rookie Romain Grosjean, who took his first pole position in the series and would go on to finish second on the day, his first podium in single-seater since 2015, and just 6 months on from that horrifying accident in Bahrain that the broadcasters wanted to show every half an hour. But don't worry, they're going to show it every half an hour on CBS in front of less audiences if that deal goes through. Romain Grosjean wanted to...
I'm going to be sick.
Romain Grosjean commented after the race and saying, "It was so cool to lead the pack and fight for the win. Forgot how much I loved that. Thank you, IndyCar and Dale Coyne Racing, for reminding me. Now I want more. Blue flags cost us a win, but our day will come." King, with 3 new winners already and the 3 youngest drivers in the series winning this season between Veekay and Colton Herta and Pato O'Ward. Just how good is this IndyCar youth movement?
Well, I'd say we need to wait and see if it sticks, because it feels like we go through this every 3 or 4 years, where we got a whole slew of first-time winners, and then 2 years down the road, where'd they all go? Where'd they all go?
They're all sitting under Scott Dixon's boot.
He's adapted again like Doomsday in the comic books.
I'm fairly certain that a number of drivers will stick and will be in IndyCar long term, but it's not a guarantee that everyone will be around in 3 years' time.
Because before Rinus Veekay came on the scene, would you have ever imagined back in 2016 when Joseph Newgarden won at Iowa with a broken freaking collarbone that Ed Carpenter Racing wouldn't win another race for 5 years? And that in that time they would have other promising prospects like Spencer Pigot, like Ed Jones off the back of a Ganassi ride, and those didn't work out, and you're thinking once they brought in Rinus Veekay last year, you're thinking, well, certainly this has got to work out. And I'm glad that it is working out, because he loves this place, and he looked excellent, just ripped around Romain Grosjean in the second half of the race, while Grosjean was having to fight his way through all sorts of traffic, whether it be Montoya, Sato, Bourdais. Man, there's a lot of XF1 guys in that mess, huh?
Yeah, it's a situation where, like, if someone told me that Ed Carpenter Racing wouldn't win another race for 5 years, I'd be like, so you're telling me Ed Carpenter Racing no longer exists?
You know, given motorsport, that's probably not a million miles away.
But, yeah.
I like this youth movement.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Because, we've gone through first 5 races, 5 different winners, 3 first-time winners. It feels like a lot of people are putting their mark on the season and making sure that they're going to be a name that people don't forget.
Yeah.
I said it during IndyCar's much edited 2020 season at the Harvest Grand Prix where he was wheel banging with Colton Herta. I said on Twitter at the time, if this is the future of the sport is in very safe hands. And I stand by that sentiment now. I mean, Rinus was superb. Absolutely superb. His pace in open air was fantastic. The series knowledge of clearing the traffic over Grosjean was probably what got him the W on the day. And we'll get to Grosjean in a minute, but that was very, very impressively done. Now, that again, it looked like a guy that had been doing it 5 years already. He did not put a foot wrong the whole way. We put some spectacular overtakes as well. The splitting of the Johnson-Palou sandwich and him coming through the middle was superb.
I don't know if that's going to end up on the list of Overtake of the Year nominees, but I've got to say, it's at least on the fringe.
Unfortunately, we've had a stacked year where 2 entries got in last week. It's already getting quite congested in there. So who knows
the bar
if that holds up. The Scott is going to be a hotly contested award this year. We're going to be at knuckleheads over that one in come December. But that was a superb win and yet another fantastic endorsement for racing in America. I mean, this is the same Rinus Veekay that said that straight up his family could not afford to race in Europe. Period. And Rinus has made history. He's the first man to win on every stage of the road to Indy, and now obviously the Premier class itself.
I am amazed that he's the first one, given all the guys who come up through the road of Indy. And we've talked sometimes about how Indy Lights sometimes has trouble attracting something resembling a full grid of cars, even in the years where he had dudes like Colton Herta, Patricio Ward, and now Rinus Veekay. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the best talents still rise to the top, regardless if they're racing against 25 other drivers or if they're racing against 5 other drivers. But we'd like to have it closer to 25 other drivers than 5. I think we can all agree on that.
Agreed.
Yeah, we also give our condolences to Jack Harvey, who was on the same tire strategy until a cacophony of sequential errors, from a failing wheel gun to a deflated tire to a drive-through penalty for an improper pit stop, took him out of contention for his second podium and probably could have taken him out of contention for that first win.
Yeah, he would have been in the fight for the win were it not for those problems. Shank is doing good, but Shank has to fix the operational errors, because I think that's the second time this year that issues in the pits have really cost Jack a great result.
After that first race in Texas, he was 5th in the standings. He's dropped to 13th. But it's still early days, of course. Anything can still happen. I want to talk about Romain Grosjean. And, folks, Romain
it feels
Grosjean
good.
of old is back. You know,
It feels so good.
Can I just say, I like this redemption story of a driver who has been massively ridiculed for on-track mistakes for like the bulk of his 10-year IndyCar career, who was face-to-face with his own death 6 months ago in Bahrain, that effectively ended his F1 career, apart from the demo run he's going to get with Mercedes later on. That's been reshuffled a bit. I like that this dude is enjoying racing again. I like that this dude is competing for wins with a Dale Coyne racing team that, yes, they are not going to be on the level of a Ganassi or Penske or Andretti in terms of their resources. But the fact that he is up there competing for victories again is a ringing endorsement of how much fun he is having. And I just want to ask y'all, how big a win is it for IndyCar that Romain Grosjean's up at the front again?
Huge. And I know the conversation's going to come up, but how quickly we forget that this is a driver who has double-digit podiums in Formula One, more than most of the current grid.
Yep.
And who was phenomenally talented coming into F1, if erratic, and for far too long wasn't able to show the talent that those of us who watched him in 2012 all the way to 2016 saw that he had.
Right, because
he's somewhere where he can show that talent.
Yeah, because our last memories of Romain Grosjean before that crash were what? Dragging out Haas cars that just couldn't work on track, and then before that, his last years were Lotus, where the team couldn't pay its invoices, and he's still
got that podium. Got that podium at Spa 2015 when the bailiffs were in the paddock, ready to shut the team down.
He's having so much fun here. I love this. This is an actual redemption story that you can get behind. Other than this driver overcame a season-ending racial slur on Twitch in the greatest comeback since Tim Richmond in '87, if you believe some folks.
Yeah.
Romain Grosjean is a genuinely likable, good dude.
Yeah.
The nicest thing I can say about him more than anything else is Romain Grosjean seems like a genuinely good guy who is enjoying his time in IndyCar, and he deserves that after years upon years of ridicule, and the only time that ridicule stopped was when he literally almost died, and a phenomenal picture taken during the weekend. Him holding his second place trophy.
A huge shout out to the brilliant Grace Hollers who took that picture. I had to give her a shout out on here because a lot of people didn't. And you've probably seen it already at some point on social media by the time it's been released. But yeah, I wanted to give a big shout out to Grace Hollers for taking, for me, one of the most powerful images I've seen in motorsport in a long, long time.
Holding his second place trophy with a hand absolutely ravaged with scarring from that crash.
Mm-hmm. And it's easy to forget that was only 6 months ago.
Yep.
And time goes very, very fast especially when you're sports fans. Like off seasons come and go very quick. And that was 6 months ago. That was only November of 2021, or 2020, I should say. And to follow on from what Cam was saying, once the internet has put you in a box as a driver, it is incredibly hard to escape that moniker. And we saw it with people of similar ability, maybe potential, but also guys that were also... I think back to Pastor Maldonado, who I look back and I go, he really wasn't that bad in the grand scheme of things. But of course, every week, if he had a debatable one, it was like, oh, look, it's Pastor at it again. And he never
escapes. A driver who, just as well, after his F1 career ended, went and won the 24 Hours of Daytona in class.
Yeah.
Incidentally was the only person in that car who didn't crash the car over the course of 24 hours.
And I would have loved to see what he could have done in IndyCar. He came close to a couple opportunities, just never came through.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. So, it's going to be a while until we see him back in an IndyCar, because, of course, he's not doing the 500. His buddy Pietro Fittipaldi is doing that in the 51 car. Do you get the feeling that first win is just right around the corner for Romain Grosjean?
Oh, I don't know, because... The one thing about IndyCar is it's so unpredictable. A team could have a tremendously quick car one weekend and then be off the pace the next. I could it generally feels like it's gonna happen sometime this season, but you can never be 100% sure.
Yeah, we're coming back to Detroit. The next pair of road and street races is the Chevrolet Detroit Grand Prix, and I recall that a certain Mike Conway won a Dale Coyne back in 2013, at least one half of those doubleheaders. So there is precedent.
Yeah.
And Grosjean is of that caliber of driver. But like you said, that's the thing about IndyCar. It's so unpredictable. I mean, look at Arrow McLaren SP's weekend. Pato O'Ward went from being the talk of the second race at Texas Motor Speedway to being the best driver in 15th place for an otherwise forgettable weekend, where Juan Pablo Montoya's grand return to the series after 4 years out, and he doesn't even crack the top 20 all day.
Lap down.
Qualified by Jimmy Johnson, who, we love Jimmy on the show, but man, he's having a hell of a time in IndyCar. And I mean, to that effect, Chip Ganassi Racing really looked rough. They recovered a bit in the race, but Dixon was nowhere in qualifying and needed to run on a very aggressive alternate strategy to get anywhere up the field. Yeah. Scott Dixon!
And yet, still finished 9th and still leads the championship by 13 points because Scott Dixon.
Yeah. The Dixon effect.
The Dixon effect. I mean, that again, going back to the Rinus point earlier, it just highlights the great thing about IndyCar. It is so competitive that weekends like this will swing on a dime. You will have back-to-back weekends where Pato looks like $1 million winning around a dodgy oval in Texas, and then a week and a half later, he's taking an escape road at the first lap of a 4 wide at Indianapolis. Because that's just IndyCar for you, where consistency is so important, because Pato O'Ward's last 2 weekends are a walk-in example of how it can all go wrong extremely quickly. Ask Connor Daly, he'll tell you all about that one.
Yeah.
And if you want consistency, Scott Dixon is your man.
I was about to say, just to put a bow on this, Dre, would you agree that IndyCar is the Premier League of major open wheel racing series? Because, it's still the same 4, 5, 6 cars or teams that end up competing for the title every year. But on any given weekend, anybody can win a race.
Yeah, Leicester City does roll up every once in a while, and congrats on their FA Cup win, by the way. That was awesome. Suck it, Chelsea. I mean, I think that's a perfect analogy. Like, yeah, the cream does rise to the top in IndyCar. It is the usual names that you will see in the top 5 or 6, but there is room if someone different can put together some strong rounds that they can feature in there. I'll give you a prime example of this. Who was 6th in the championship last year? Graham Rahal. I think he only had
top 5s every week.
Yeah, I think he only had one podium the entire, and that was at Indianapolis. And he put together some solid results, and he was rewarded for it. Last year we had Pato O'Ward and Colton Herta in the top 4. It didn't feel like it, but because of their results, it all just came together. There is wiggle room for big seasons in there if you can string results together. That's the most important thing about IndyCar, because it is so erratic a series. It's so competitive. Where I reckon there's 14 or 15 cars that can win on any given day. Jack Harvey should have was a contender for a race win here. This is no disrespect to Jack Harvey, but it's because he's never a guy you're probably going to pick to win a race, but he's performing really well this season, but the results just haven't been there. But you get the gist. There's enough wiggle room for a Leicester City to climb the ranks if they can put it all together, and that's the beautiful thing about the series. A lot
of that has to do with the big one coming up in a couple of weeks, because this was a very worthy beginning for the month of May at Indianapolis.
8,500 in 2 weeks.
Practice begins this week.
Yep. Time trials week after. Points are on offer for the Fast 9. Double points for the race. This is going to be a big one in terms of the championship. And, of course, sometimes to the series' detriment, it's the biggest race of the year. Yeah. By order of magnitude.
It's one of the biggest races on planet Earth.
Indeed. And Bump Day is back this year as well, because the official entry list is out, and it's 35 strong. So, not everyone will be making the race.
2 people. We don't know who, because Indianapolis works in mysterious ways. Sometimes your Lotus's IndyCar program, sometimes your Team Penske. But 2 people are going home this year.
No one knows, and that's the beautiful and awful thing about Bump Day, and we will be talking about that on next week's show, as well as a little bit of a preview towards the 500 as well. Obviously, you know a lot more about what's going to be happening by the time we get to next week. Also, there's some flagship Formula One race this weekend. Apparently, it's at Monaco. I mean, who's excited for that after what happened last week?
I'm very excited for the Bump Day pre-race show.
I'm excited for the Steak and Shake.
I'm excited to see one last qualifying lap with these big, stupid, fast cars around Monaco. But the race itself, pass.
Tune in for Steak and Shake. Tune in for Monaco qualifying on Saturday. That's awesome.
Tune in for Steak and Shake.
And let's be real, whoever qualifies on pole, and we should have a legitimate fight for pole this year, probably winning the race.
Probably.
I was devastated to learn that this is a different Steak and Shake for the one that exists in America. I mean, I know it's the same name, but I looked at it this is a much more bougie Steak and Shake than the one I'm used to. And it's not just because it's set in Monaco.
Oh, that's going to be fun. So yeah, Formula One at Monaco and Bump Day for the 500. That'll be the predominant features into next week's show. Looking forward to spending 45 minutes on Bump Day and about 10 on Monaco. I'm getting that set up right here and now. But that'll put a bow on episode 305, the MVP Mr. Worldwide edition. Places you can find us one more time real quick. We're on youtube.com/motorsport101, facebook.com/motorsport101, Twitter at motorsport_101. At handles one more time, at Harrison101HD, at RJ O'Connell, at Ryan Eric King, at C Buckley 917. And if you really, really like us, you can back us financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 for all the audio shows, $10 for the video version, and live recordings as well on Discord. Yep, on website as well, motorsport101.com. I put a piece up there about Jack Miller and his career, even more prominent now. He's won a second race in a row. I wrote about him and the power of betting on yourself. It could easily be a video by the time this goes out as well, if I can find time. So that'll be up there as well. So check that out if you haven't seen it already. I've been Andre Harrison. We'll be back for Bump Day. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison, they've been RJ O'Connell, Ryan Eric King, and Cam Buckley. Sayonara.
We're vibing, y'all.
Bye.
Vibing at the Steak and Shake. Eat a burger, drink a shake, catch some Formula One front wing bits.